Missing person report comes in for Daylene Carlson. The original report was by her aunt that she went to this bar and did not come home.
Daylene decided that she was going to go to a local bar called Finnegan's, and she had plans to meet some friends there. Daylene's aunt and her cousin heard from her a little bit through the night. Her plan was to come home, and then Daylene never showed up. My understanding is that Daylene communicated with her family very consistently, and if Daylene said, hey, I'm gonna be home, then she would come home. So the fact that she had not communicated with those folks at all, that was extremely alarming.
Daylene Carlson was full of life and energy. She was from Sandpoint, Idaho, loved to explore, kind of a free spirit. She traveled the United States with a magazine crew from city to city, trying to get subscriptions for a variety of magazines. So she was a person that was, I think, looking for her way in the world, but definitely enjoying her life.
When Daylene Carlson moved to Stockton, she moved in with her aunt and her cousin. And she decided she liked the community so much that she wanted to stay and she wanted to go to college here. Daylene had never gone missing in the past. So the fact that she seemingly just disappeared off the face of the earth, it did seem exceptionally unusual.
If they know anything, just it doesn't matter how little it is, that if they would please come forward, contact the police department. She's a very quiet person, but once you get to know her, she's just bubbly and she just wouldn't hurt anybody or anything. We love Daylene so much, and we want her home.
Her cousin said that Daylene had recently broken up with a boyfriend, Jacob Evangelisti. I think Jacob had some feelings about that. He wanted to remain in a relationship with Daylene, and Daylene did not. Part of the same kind of social network was Jason Gilley. Daylene and Jason were just friends, and Jason's home was kind of the party place. We learned that these young men were at the bar. Jason was there, and Jacob was there. And given the circumstances, that certainly caught our attention.
So we want to talk to the ex-boyfriend, Jacob, because he has a reason to want to maybe get back with her, or maybe he's upset.
Jacob was very willing to talk to us, and Jacob insisted that he knew nothing about Daylene's disappearance and that he was more concerned for her than anybody was. And he seemed to be very transparent and very honest. And the sense was that he was telling us the truth. Jason told us that he was at the bar and that he saw Daylene there and that the two did hang out and that they were being friendly. And as the night went on, he got a text or a call from his grandmother who relayed that Jason's son was sick and that Jason needed to come home. So according to Jason, he went to the car and he left by himself and went straight home to take care of his son who was ill. Jason told us that when he left, Daylene was still partying at the bar, and he had no idea what her plans were from that point on because he went straight home and didn't see Daylene again. So there was one camera angle in the hall near the restrooms, and in that particular angle, you're able to see that Daleen is kind of milling about with a group of men. And at one point, you see one of the men put his arm around Daleen, and Daleen kind of brushes him off and steps away. And when that person who tried to kind of bring Daleen in for a hug turns around, we're able to see that it's Jason Gilley. So watching the video and really dissecting it in all the different angles, what we saw was at the very end of the night, Jason left at 12 minutes after 1 a.m. and walked out of view of the camera. And then Daleen left 3 minutes later, also right out of view of the camera. They left not necessarily right together, but in very close proximity in time. By way of text message, we learned that Daleen's plan was to leave the bar with Jason and then go to the store and get a bottle of Jägermeister and continue the party at Jason's house. Jason said that he was not with Daleen. So, of course, the text messages caused more questions for us than we had answers to at that time. Because we had the information that they were reportedly going to go pick up a bottle of Jägermeister, we just looked at what a logical route would be from the bar to Jason's home, what liquor stores were along that route. And so we visited several of those type of locations, which ultimately led us to a local grocery store that did sell alcohol at that hour. And through that visit, we were able to obtain surveillance footage of a couple of young folks buying a bottle of alcohol. And the surveillance footage was not great. But when the two went to the register, ultimately we end up identifying Jason and Daleen. We knew that Jason was not telling us the truth simply because he told us that he went home by himself. And then he is seen on video buying a bottle of alcohol with Daleen.
Okay, Jason's lying to us. Why is Jason lying to us? That's the question.
Jason was not present. He actually was out of town. So we spoke with his grandmother. And we specifically asked if she told Jason that he needed to come home because Jason's son was sick. And his grandmother looked at us in a kind of a puzzled way and said, no, I never did that. I don't know what you're talking about. During the search warrant at Jason's home, there were several key pieces of evidence that were located. First and foremost, we found women's underwear in Jason's bedroom, which were obviously out of place. And we also found a certain amount of marijuana in Jason's home, enough to build a case he possessed it for sale. It was ultra clear that Jason was not being honest and that we now had enough, at least based on the possession of marijuana, to take him into custody on that and have a very direct conversation with him. So on August 14th, Jason was located and he was arrested and was immediately taken into custody.
Sorry about the wait, man. I don't
Like we keep,
unlike you,
like we keep saying, we got so much stuff. It's crazy.
Well, we appreciate your cooperation, by the way. I don't know if I said that. It really helps. I mean, we really.
I understand it's all procedures. It's
Yeah, no, we appreciate. I mean, all you're doing is helping us.
So I
So
wasn't upset about my room upside down. But so
we're not worried about weed or whatever. I'm just curious, to be honest with you. What is a little sack like that? What does it cost?
I've been getting $10 for them.
10 per.
Yeah, so I'm not really trying to make money off it. And
Just kind of smoke for free, kind of thing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so now going back to Saturday.
Saturday, it was a long, boring day. So I think I did some yard work. I can't
quite remember.
You went to the bar at what time?
I would say, again, 9 or 10ish.
Okay.
It's about the time I show up.
I wanted Jason to lock himself into a statement. If the statement was going to be absolutely the truth, that would be great. If he chose to continue to stick to his story and tell us more lies, we were going to let him do just that.
Quite remember. I do remember playing beer pong, drinking some beer. I seen her, Daylene, there, and I seen her, like I said, bouncing, or I told you before, she was bouncing around. About, I would say, a little bit before 1, grandma texted me, said, hey, are you busy? Can you come home and take care of your son? All right, I will.
And then where do you go?
Straight home.
The thing that we want most is a full confession. A very close second to that is a statement that's riddled with lies. And in that interview room, Jason continued to lie.
We just want her home, safe. I just want my family to, you know, have peace and my aunt get her daughter home.
Everybody has their own kind of nuances as to how they speak, how they act. And I was just kind of getting a read on who Jason is and how he would generally communicate so that we could then identify behavior changes from that. And that's really what we're looking for, is what that behavior change is.
So what do you think about all this stuff and everything that's floating around?
Honestly, I don't even know. I know it's not good. It's sad, and I really have no thoughts on it. I mean,
What do you think happened?
I'm thinking she left with somebody, and hopefully she's just stuck somewhere, and hopefully she's all right. I don't have no idea what happened. No idea.
Have you tried, since you found out she went missing, have you helped out, like, to try to find her, to do anything?
I was gonna print out some flyers, but my printer was out of ink.
Tried calling her or texting her or anything?
I tried calling, but the phone dead.
But what,
Goes straight to voicemail.
when did you try calling her?
Oh gosh, I couldn't even remember what day that was.
Well, I mean, has it been kind of repeatedly that you
No,
tried?
I tried one time. And,
Oh, just
and
one.
plus everybody else, like, oh yeah, phone's off.
He was so nonchalant about, oh yeah, I don't know, maybe she's stuck somewhere, I hope she's okay. That doesn't make sense to me. For most adults, if something happened to one of their friends, they would do everything they could to try to help locate that person, particularly in the context of this case.
Is there anything else you could think of? Anything that you think?
That would help us out.
I'm not one to point fingers, but I mean, Jacob was just staring her down all night long, watching her every little move.
What I kind of understood, and maybe I misinterpreted, this was pretty much she broke up with him.
I don't know if it was mutual or if he broke up with her or she broke up with him. I just
Okay.
know she was all excited about being apart from Jacob, honestly. She was all excited.
About being apart from him?
She's like, I'm done with him, so glad it's over. I don't know what I seen in him.
Right.
Every time I looked toward his direction, he was staring at her.
Okay.
So, I don't,
Yeah.
I noticed that. So.
He immediately went to deflecting, bringing up reasons. Oh, she was drinking. She was talking to a lot of guys. Jacob was staring at her. You know, that's an ex-boyfriend. So when people start deflecting, they're hiding something. And our goal is to know what they're hiding and why.
You know when you have, here's the thing.
Yeah. Same ones you guys took.
So nothing else you could think of? Anything you want to add on the timeline?
Anything you want to, you know, that you think that maybe you made a mistake when you're telling us? Okay.
I can think of.
Okay.
We have a ton of resources that we use,
Right.
investigative tools that we use,
Right.
and there's some inconsistencies in her story. and we want you to clear this up for us.
Really horrible times.
That's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
That's all right.
And you can't expect us. We don't expect you to know every minute
Right.
of what you did.
That's not reasonable.
It's not reasonable. But that's the good thing with surveillance, video surveillance at different locations, the cameras that are on the intersections, and the such. So we don't have to account for your time, but these things take their time stamped.
What we can see is literally the wheels begin to turn in his head, right? And him beginning to recount, where might I have gone that they might have surveillance footage.
So we need you to be completely honest with us,
Because-
we know a lot more of what's going on.
Right.
Okay, and this is your opportunity to be completely honest with us, and we need you to be honest because we know a lot of information.
What you see is him kind of shift in his chair. And that's a classic tell of somebody who's beginning to feel very uncomfortable. Jason is beginning to connect the dots that we certainly know more than we revealed to him originally. And his body language said so much more than his words did.
So Jason, let's stop goofing around. Let's stop playing games, okay? Because we know that there's a whole lot more to this story, and this is not the time for games.
We just need you to be honest.
This is a big deal.
Any investigator knows if somebody is talking, you're making progress. It might be very, very slow progress. And even if he's gonna lie, the fact that he's talking, if he's talking, we're on the right path.
You're in a good position to help yourself right now.
So let's really consider some questions, and let's really consider the answers that you're giving before we go further down the road, Jason. Because I don't want you to waste this opportunity that you have right now, okay, to be honest with us. Because
Trying, saying everything I can. I mean, I understand. I don't know what you guys know or anything, but
Jason, we know a lot of stuff.
And-
okay, and we need you to be honest.
please don't waste this opportunity, because this is serious, okay? So don't do that to yourself.
Me leaning in and putting my hand on his forearm there is a way for me to try to connect with him, because humans like that human touch. And if that need is being met in this way, then there's a higher likelihood, in my experience, that somebody's going to continue to talk.
So let's start over. So on Saturday, okay, what time do you get to the bar?
got to the bar probably 10:15.
Okay,
I was there until about 1 o'clock.
okay, and what happened at 1?
At 1 o'clock, I left
Because what?
because of my son.
Okay,
So I went home, made sure my son was all right, and that was it.
let's talk about,
Let's talk about your grandma and the text first. Because when we were out there on Thursday night, I spoke to your grandma, and I
Right.
spoke to her in detail about that.
right,
About your son being sick and all that, and she explained what she did or didn't do,
right.
and it's not
quite jive.
consistent with what you're saying. So this is your opportunity to straighten it out for us.
She didn't text.
You're right, she didn't.
You're right.
I had just went home.
Okay. Why did you not tell us the truth about that?
Walked to the.
What's the purpose of it?
There is no purpose.
Well, listen, people don't lie to the police for no reason, Jason.
Right.
And we asked you multiple times, and you gave the same lie over and over. And, you know,
Well,
that
I was texting a lot. I was,
who else were you texting?
I honestly could not remember who I was texting.
His brain's going 800 million directions, and he's trying to come up with a new strategy because he knows his whole statement is, I left to see my son. Well, that's no longer true. So now they're just going to keep chipping away at him and have him keep contradicting himself, and then hopefully each time he'll reveal a little bit more of the truth.
So why did you decide to leave the bar?
Because I wanted to go home to my son.
Okay, so who did you leave the bar with?
Nobody. I left by myself.
And where did you go?
I went home.
From the bar directly to your house?
Didn't make any stops. Stop nowhere.
Wait a minute. Wait.
Excuse me, Jason.
I left the bar. Okay, hold on. I left the bar with Daleen to Food for Less. I bought a bottle of Jaeger for her, dropped her back off at the bar, and then me.
Now, why would you lie to us about this, Jason?
I just remembered that I went to Food for
But
Less.
that's pretty important.
Jason,
You've been very detailed on everything to us.
Jason,
and you,
this is,
No, I understand.
it's not something you forget, Jason.
It was just so obviously fabricated that he just happened to remember. Oh gosh, thank you. Yeah, I forgot, but yes, now I remember.
This is not something you forget.
I understand.
So let's talk about this. This is serious.
It slipped my mind. I'm serious.
I don't think it did, Jason. As a matter of fact, I'm quite certain it didn't. Okay? There's a whole lot more to this story, and all these questions that we sat in here and asked you, we obviously knew the answer.
Right.
That was not a slip of the mind. That was a lie.
Right.
There's a big difference. It was a lie, correct?
Yeah.
Why?
Scared.
Of what?
Because I know she disappeared around the same time.
So why would you be scared about that, Jason?
Jason clearly wasn't going to volunteer any more information, so it seemed obvious that we needed to pivot on our strategy to confront him with facts about his lies. Ultimately, we wanted to know where Daleen was. That was at the root of it all. Where is she?
Most important is we need to get Daleen back to her family. Right? So you're going to help us find her.
I don't know how I'm going to do that.
I'm sure you do. Jason, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. Why would you lie to us about having gone home by yourself?
Slipped my mind. I'm sorry.
Okay. What else slipped your mind up until right now? What else do you want to change about your story? This is your chance. Jason,
use this opportunity.
let's talk about your conversation with Daleen leading up to going to Food for Less.
I had offered, I said, do you want to come back to the house, crash on the couch? She said, okay. I said, okay, cool, I'll get a bottle. I had changed my mind. I bought the bottle still and went home.
And where did you take her?
Took her back to Finn's. She was with me and I dropped her back off at Finn's on the way back to my house.
So you dropped her back off at the bar?
Yes.
You're sure?
Shortly after 1. So we left a little bit before 1, maybe right at 1.
You're sure?
What did she do when you dropped her off?
She walked into the bar.
That's weird. Jason, you know what's weird about that? You know what's really weird about all that? There's a lot of people at Finn's. There's cameras everywhere. Guess what they caught at Finn's? After we, because we saw you guys live together.
Her come back into Finn's.
Jason.
There's no surveillance of that.
And there's surveillance everywhere. We sat and we watched hours of footage, Jason. Okay? You guys went home to your house.
No, it's not.
Jason,
Right,
let's quit around, Jason. I'm about done with it. Got it? I'm about done.
Do I need a lawyer or something? I mean, you guys are starting to yell at me. I don't understand.
Jason, listen, I apologize. I'm sorry.
I mean, yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yelling at him and cussing at him was not a successful strategy, right? And so it seemed very clear I needed to apologize and I needed to back it off. And I needed to be more of that soft touch and more like, hey, it's okay. We're here. We want to help you. This is your time.
And you're a good guy, okay? So, we can make this work. We can make this okay. But you gotta be honest. Starting right now. Starting right now.
She walked towards the bar around Harvey's.
For blood, for dead bodies, for... Why don't you tell us about where you and Daleen went after Food for Less, Jason? Because it wasn't to the bar, Jason.
I'm really scared because I know when people missing, they look like you guys are looking at me. That it's the person that they were last with usually has done something.
Okay, then be honest and stop lying.
I'm sorry, I'm really scared. We went back to my house. We drank a little bit. Then she called and she started to walk off to go home. I wasn't going to let her walk all the way home. She'd been drinking a lot. So I got in my grandma's car. And I don't know how much she got in.
Why is it that you lied to everybody?
Because I know how people look at when you're the last person. Like everybody's pointing fingers at me because they think she left the bar with me.
Well, she did leave the bar with you, Jason.
Right, but now she's missing, and I don't have anything to do with her missing.
Then, Jason, why did you not tell us that from the get-go, Jason? Because here's the problem.
I'm really scared. I'm still scared.
Things happen, man.
It's
Things
okay,
happen.
okay?
Okay, because you're missing.
But so let's make it better. Okay, Jason, let's make it better.
Let's make it better right now.
Okay, let's make it better. Do the right thing, man. You're a good guy, and I know in your heart.
Let her walk.
Hey,
I'm a good guy. Let her walk away.
in your heart, I know you want to do the right thing.
I
Okay,
don't mind it.
that's
People make
okay.
mistakes, Jason. Do the right thing now for you.
What am I supposed to do now? It's been 7 days.
The more that he becomes emotional and the more that he cries, it becomes apparent to me that these are not real tears. What we see is him beginning to get really, really worried about himself and not about Daleen. He knows that he's in serious trouble.
Jason, the more you talk about it, the better you're gonna feel.
The better you're gonna
Don't
feel.
Don't you feel?
You gotta
relief
feel
right
better.
now?
It should be to let her walk.
But Jason,
She made it home.
you gotta feel a little better about, being able to get this off your
You're able to
chest.
tell us now. You haven't been able to tell anybody.
I'll be because I'm scared. I'm mad that I didn't get her home.
Okay,
But
hey,
get it off
hey,
your chest.
Jason, listen, because ultimately the truth is gonna come out. Ultimately, the truth will come out. Okay, and how much had you had to drink between
Between the two of us, we drink the whole bottle.
of Jaeger?
I should not even get right.
Did you guys have sex?
No.
Jason.
Jason,
Jason.
why would you lie about that, Jason? Jason, stop lying.
Let it out now.
It's okay, man.
I let her walk away.
Jason, that's okay, man. Okay, but you gotta stop lying. Okay, stop lying. Is that the first time you guys had sex? Was she upset because?
Because we were both drunk. It should have never happened.
Well, that's okay. Was she upset because you guys?
I think so. I didn't want to pursue it. I didn't want to.
Why do you think she was upset?
Should have probably sobered it up. We had sex and we hung out for a little bit more, and then she just said she wants to go home, and she started walking. So I got her in the corner.
Was she in the front seat or the back seat?
See? She was telling me just let her go, just don't worry about her, just let her go. I figured she
Was she yelling?
I figured she was upset about the sex. I figured,
What was she saying?
she was like, I'm horrible. I can't believe I did this. You're a piece of garbage.
To you?
Yeah.
Why was she saying that about you?
I don't know. Like I said,
What were you saying back?
nothing. I said, I'm just going to take you home. You'll be all right. And then she got out of the car. And I didn't want to pursue the issue, so I just do it. That's what I did. So I should have just made sure she went home.
Jason said that they drove all the way to Modesto, which is about 30 minutes south of us, and that Daleen got out of the car at some unknown place, and instead of alerting the authorities in that community and asking for help, he just left and went to a gas station.
You were so good to try to stop her.
That's what I did. I don't know.
She got out of the car and you didn't go around to help her?
No, I didn't. I really don't. That's why I didn't want to tell anybody.
Okay? She didn't jump out of the car, Jason. Jason.
Yeah, she did. She didn't jump out. She stepped out of the car.
Jason, she didn't step out of the car. She didn't just walk away, Jason. And you didn't just drive off. That doesn't make any sense, Jason. Because when you lie, it's very... Jason, somebody...
No.
Jason.
Jason.
Jason. Jason.
No.
Where are we going to find the body?
Help us find her.
Help
Jason.
us bring her home.
Her family deserves it,
You
dude.
have a family. She has a pension.
She deserves it. I know that.
She does.
So let's...
do anything to her.
Come on, Jason, listen to me. You don't seem to understand the gravity of the situation, okay? When Jen
You
explains
guys are
it,
trying to make me admit something that I didn't do.
I don't want you, definitely don't want you to do that.
I have a lawyer.
Okay?
I'm sorry, you guys are just... I feel like you're making me say something that's not true.
No, we don't want to put anything in your mouth, but no words in your mouth.
Yep, it's over. So
You asked for an attorney, so.
we can't talk to you at all. So here's what's gonna happen, okay? You're gonna go to jail. Okay? Jason, tonight.
Jason asking for a lawyer and our communication having to end with him was pretty devastating. As somebody who was fielding the calls from her family every single day, I wanted to know where she was.
We are looking at a no body, no cause of death investigation. There's no evidence really of his kidnap or what we believe to be murder of Daleen Carls. We just know that she has disappeared. He is the last person to see her. He is lying about his interactions with her, but that's all we have at this moment.
Gilly was set free for lack of evidence after police arrested him soon after Carlson's disappearance. This is the only interview he's done.
Really haven't known her that long, and just to be accused of this, it really hurts.
Carlson was last seen with Gilly leaving a bar, then shopping at a grocery store. She was never seen again.
Not that person that you all see on TV. I'm a kind person. I don't push myself on anybody. Everybody that knows me knows that.
It just seemed like such a perfect opportunity to have another discussion with him about Daleen's whereabouts, but clearly I was not the right person to have that discussion with him.
Let's quit around, Jason. I'm about done with it. Got it? I'm about done.
Introducing Detective Dela Cruz to Jason was an opportunity to see how he would respond to a female investigator.
He doesn't have to talk to me. He doesn't have to be there. He wasn't under arrest here, so he could really have told me to f*** off.
What happens is you come across a lot of people. I do.
Right.
You know, in the course of 20 years. And there's people that you have not empathy but I kind of feel for you, if that makes any sense.
I think so, I don't know.
Jason seems like the type of suspect that just needed to be coddled and just be reassured. as opposed to hitting him hard and him shutting down.
You seem like a nice guy.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of times I know that nice people get caught up in stuff.
That's what I'm afraid of.
That's what I'm afraid for you too, to be very honest with you.
Yeah.
Because I think you've gotten caught up in stuff, and my heart feels for you. I feel bad for you.
Right.
I think something happened. You're not someone to actually hurt somebody. I think something bad happened.
So when you watch this, he acknowledges for a minute by nodding his head. You can see that when she says, something bad happened, I think you know. And he's like, yeah. And she's trying to relay to him, you can trust me.
If anybody would want to help you on this department and be on your side, you got one person.
Right.
Okay? And I don't do that often.
I understand.
There's a lot of people that I've sat across the table from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And have done some bad things. It does not make them a bad person.
Right.
By no means. Okay?
I just don't really know. Nothing else that I can think of. Like, I've been thinking every day. I don't really know.
At that point, he just kind of like didn't budge. He just reminded me of someone that wanted to go ahead and tell the truth, but it wouldn't come out of his mouth. The written timeline was something that was beneficial for the case. We wanted to do an analysis of the events in Jason's writings. So when we get it on paper, there's one portion where he starts speaking about Daleen in past tense. That's not good. That means he did something. That means she's gone.
The condition of the body was extremely poor, so we were not able to use DNA and had to use a forensic dentist who 2 days later positively identified the remains as Daleen Carlson. Daleen had been shot 5 times, and we recovered 5 spent .22 caliber casings close proximity to her body.
To have a young gal like that, that's beautiful, that has a lot going for her, to have her life cut short, it's horrible.
Prosecutors say the evidence that they were able to get once Carlson's body was discovered fits in with the timeline that they already had for the sequence of events here at Gilly's house that night. What they don't have is the murder weapon.
Through the course of this investigation, we learned who all of Jason's family was in this area. And through questioning Jason's uncle, we learned that Jason had an old .22 caliber semi-automatic handgun that he gave his uncle and told his uncle to put in a safe and keep for him.
I asked him, when did Jason give you that gun? And he said, you know, Jason gave me that gun just after that girl disappeared.
We did a forensic examination of that gun in relation to the casings that were found at the scene. And through that examination, the experts were able to say that that gun that was provided to us by the uncle was the murder weapon.
Our evidence for the rape charge was Jason's statement that Daleen woke up after having sex and was extremely mad at Jason. So those were the grounds I used, and I believe was the motive for the homicide. I believe that he was worried about being accused of rape, and that was more important to him than Daleen's life.
The amount of agony that we went through every day it was harder. Every day it was not easier. It was harder and harder and harder. And I hope that he goes down. God forgive me for saying it, but I hope he does.
Jason Gilley was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, which I believe was the right sentence.
Following the trial, the jurors explained that this video and this interrogation was critical in their decision-making because they were able to see that his thought process and his lies were kind of the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, in his fate.
He took my daughter away.
Why take somebody else's life because of selfishness?
The road outside town used to go quiet after midnight. Not silent, never silent, but quiet in that heavy Midwestern way where the wind slides through empty fields and the distant hum of a highway becomes the only reminder that the world is still moving. On a cold night in October 2007, something else moved along that road. Something that would leave behind a mystery so stubborn, so unsettling, that people in this corner of Ohio would spend the next decade and a half whispering about it like a ghost story that refused to die. It started with a car. Not wrecked. Not burned. Just sitting there. Parked at a strange angle on the gravel shoulder of County Road 18, headlights still on, the engine silent, but warm enough that the first deputy to arrive would later swear it had been shut off only minutes earlier. Inside the car, the driver's door hung open. The keys were still in the ignition. And the woman who owned the car had vanished. Her name was Emily Carter, 24 years old, a nursing student with a quiet laugh and a habit of calling her mother every evening before bed. In a town of fewer than 12,000 people, everyone knew the Carters. Her father ran a hardware store on Main Street. Her mother worked part-time at the public library. Emily herself had grown up here, graduated from the local high school, volunteered at the church food drive. The kind of person who didn't disappear. But on the night of October 12, 2007, that's exactly what she did. The last confirmed sighting of Emily Carter came just after 10:30 p.m. A waitress at a diner near the edge of town remembered her clearly. Emily had stopped in for coffee after a late study session at the community college. She sat alone in a booth by the window, textbooks spread across the table, highlighting notes between sips. Nothing unusual. Nothing dramatic. Just another quiet night in a quiet town. At 11:04 p.m., Emily paid her bill. At 11:07 p.m., she walked out the door. And sometime between the diner parking lot and the stretch of County Road 18 less than 3 miles away, something happened. Something violent enough, or strange enough, to erase her from the scene entirely. The first call to police came at 11:32 p.m. A truck driver heading toward the interstate noticed the car sitting with its headlights blazing into the darkness. He slowed down, expecting to see someone changing a tire or searching through the trunk. Instead, he saw the open door. And no one inside. The deputy who responded, Mark Ellison, had worked rural patrol for nearly 15 years. He had seen abandoned vehicles before. Drunk drivers walking home. Couples arguing and leaving one another on the roadside. Mechanical breakdowns. But something about this scene made him uneasy the moment he stepped out of the cruiser. The engine block was still warm. Emily's purse sat on the passenger seat. Her phone lay face down on the floorboard. And scattered across the gravel, just outside the driver's door, were three small objects that would haunt investigators for years. A broken bracelet. A single white sneaker. And a smear of dark red on the edge of the doorframe. Blood. Not a lot. But enough to suggest something had gone very, very wrong. By midnight, the quiet road was flooded with flashing lights. Sheriff's deputies. State troopers. A crime scene unit rolling in from the nearest city. Yellow tape stretched along the roadside while investigators crouched in the gravel, photographing every inch of the area. The first theory was simple. Car trouble. A random attacker. A struggle. Maybe someone passing through had seen Emily stranded and stopped. Maybe the encounter turned violent. Maybe she had been forced into another vehicle. But within hours, the case began to twist into something far stranger. Because nothing else was there. No tire marks from another car. No footprints leading away into the fields. No drag marks. No trail of blood. It was as if Emily Carter had stepped out of her vehicle and simply ceased to exist. Search teams moved quickly. By dawn, dozens of volunteers were combing the surrounding farmland with flashlights and radios. Dogs were brought in from 2 counties away. Helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights slicing through the early morning fog. They searched the roadside ditches. They searched the tree lines. They searched every abandoned barn and irrigation shed within miles. Nothing. No clothing. No body. No sign of a struggle beyond the few haunting clues left beside the car. For the Carter family, the waiting began that morning. Emily's mother would later describe the moment deputies arrived at the house as the instant her world cracked in half. 2 patrol cars in the driveway. A knock on the door before sunrise. The kind of quiet, careful voices that always mean something terrible has already happened. But at that moment, no one could say what. Because Emily Carter wasn't officially dead. She wasn't even officially kidnapped. She was just gone. News spread quickly through town. By afternoon, the story had reached local television stations. A young nursing student missing, car abandoned on a rural road, blood at the scene. The words, possible abduction, began appearing in headlines. Students at the college held candlelight vigils. Flyers with Emily's smiling photo were taped to gas pumps, grocery store windows, and church bulletin boards. Have you seen this woman? For days, investigators chased every lead they could find. They interviewed the diner staff. They spoke with classmates, professors, neighbors. They traced Emily's phone records, looking for the last number she called or texted. But the data painted a picture of normalcy. Her final message had gone out at 10:48 p.m. Heading home soon. Love you. Sent to her mother. Nothing suspicious. Nothing alarming. Just a daughter letting her family know she'd be back shortly. Except she never came home. Then came the first strange clue. 3 days after Emily disappeared, a farmer reported finding something unusual along the edge of his property nearly 2 miles from where the car had been discovered. It was a shoe. Not just any shoe. The matching sneaker to the one found beside the car. Placed carefully near a fence post, as if someone had set it there deliberately. Investigators rushed to the scene. Again they searched the surrounding land. Again they found nothing else. But the discovery changed the tone of the investigation instantly. Because now it looked like someone was moving pieces of the puzzle. Someone who knew exactly how closely the case was being watched. Someone who might even be watching the search unfold in real time. Within a week, the FBI joined the investigation. Behavioral analysts studied the details. A young woman. Late at night. Rural road. Signs of a brief struggle, but no body. Theories multiplied. Maybe it was a traveling predator. Maybe a serial offender passing through Ohio. Maybe someone Emily knew had staged the scene. The possibilities spread like cracks across glass. Meanwhile, the town itself began to change. The quiet comfort people once felt walking down dark streets faded quickly. Parents started picking up their children from evening activities, instead of letting them drive home alone. Porch lights stayed on all night. Every unfamiliar car suddenly looked suspicious. Every stranger felt like a potential threat. The disappearance of Emily Carter had turned a peaceful community into a place filled with questions and fear. But the most disturbing moment came 2 weeks after the search began. Because that's when investigators discovered something they had missed the first night. Something hidden in plain sight. A security camera. Mounted on the corner of an old grain facility nearly half a mile from where Emily's car had been found. The footage was grainy. The angle imperfect. But at 11:17 p.m., the camera captured headlights moving slowly along County Road 18. Emily's car. Behind it, another vehicle. A dark pickup truck. Following closely. Too closely. And then, just seconds before the vehicles disappeared from view, the truck accelerated. As if closing the distance. As if the driver had decided that whatever happened next would happen right there on that lonely stretch of road. Investigators froze the frame again and again, trying to pull details from the shadowy shape behind Emily's car. Make. Model. License plate. Anything. But the image refused to give up its secrets. The truck was simply a silhouette. A ghost on the road. And that single piece of footage would become the most haunting clue in the entire case. Because it proved one terrifying thing. Emily Carter had not been alone that night. Someone had been there with her. Someone who vanished just as completely as she did. And somewhere out there, beyond the quiet cornfields, beyond the flashing patrol lights and search helicopters, that person was still living their life. Driving roads. Passing strangers. Carrying the memory of a night in 2007 when a young woman stepped out of her car and never came back. By the second week, the quiet town in Ohio no longer felt quiet at all. The story had grown legs. Local stations ran the footage of Emily Carter's smiling graduation photo every hour. National news networks began circling the case with the kind of curiosity that follows a mystery too strange to ignore. Young woman vanishes, car abandoned, blood at the door, shadowy pickup truck captured in the background. A cold October wind swept through the county as investigators returned again and again to the same lonely stretch of County Road 18, walking the gravel shoulder like archaeologists, searching for something buried beneath the surface of a moment already past. Because somewhere between 11:17 p.m. and 11:32 p.m., Emily Carter disappeared. 15 minutes. That was the window. 15 minutes in which the road swallowed her whole. Detectives began reconstructing every second of that timeline with ruthless precision. They started at the diner. The security footage from inside the building showed Emily leaving exactly as the waitress remembered. She pushed the door open, stepped into the parking lot, and crossed toward her silver sedan. Nothing unusual. No one following her. No suspicious figures lingering near the entrance. Just a college student walking out into the cool Ohio night. Another camera from a gas station 2 blocks away captured her car passing by minutes later, headlights bright against the dark road leading toward home. Still nothing strange. Still nothing alarming. Then the trail moved toward the farmland. That's where the grain facility camera picked her up again. Emily's car driving along County Road 18. And behind it, the pickup truck. That truck became the obsession of the investigation. Frame by frame, technicians studied the footage. They enhanced contrast, adjusted brightness, zoomed into the grainy outline, until the pixels blurred into a smudge of light and shadow. It appeared to be an older model. Possibly late 1990s. Dark-colored, black or deep blue. Extended cab. But there were thousands of trucks like that in Ohio alone. The image refused to become clearer. So investigators took another approach. They started knocking on doors. Every house along County Road 18. Every farm within a 5-mile radius. Deputies asked the same question over and over again. Did you see a pickup truck that night? Most people said no. But one witness said yes. His name was Harold Green, a retired mechanic who lived alone in a farmhouse just under a mile from where Emily's car had been found. Green told detectives he had been awake late watching television when he heard something unusual outside. An engine revving. Fast. Aggressive. At first he thought it was teenagers racing down the rural road like they sometimes did on weekends. But when he stepped onto his porch, the sound had already faded into the distance. He checked the clock. 11:25 p.m. Right inside the window investigators were trying to fill. Green didn't see the vehicle itself. But he remembered something else. Headlights. 2 sets. Moving fast. One behind the other. The detail made detectives lean closer across the kitchen table. Because if Green was right, it meant the pickup truck wasn't just following Emily. It might have been chasing her. That theory changed everything. The possibility of a random roadside encounter suddenly felt less likely. Instead, investigators began asking a darker question. Had Emily known the driver? Had someone followed her intentionally? Someone who knew she would be leaving the diner that night. Someone who knew the quiet back road she always used to drive home. Because friends and family confirmed something important. Emily had a routine. Every night after late classes, she took County Road 18 instead of the highway. It shaved a few minutes off the trip and avoided traffic lights through town. Most people wouldn't know that route. Unless they knew her. Detectives turned their attention to Emily's life. They combed through phone records, emails, social media messages. Every contact she'd had in the previous weeks. Ex-boyfriends were questioned first. One lived 2 towns away and had an airtight alibi. He was working a night shift at a factory when Emily disappeared. Another had moved out of state months earlier. Friends were interviewed. Classmates. Co-workers from the hospital where she worked part-time. Everyone described the same person. Kind. Focused. Responsible. No enemies. No known threats. No secret drama hiding beneath the surface. Which made the next discovery even more unsettling. 3 days after Emily vanished, forensic technicians finished analyzing the small smear of blood found on the edge of her car door. The DNA matched Emily. But there was something else mixed within it. A second profile. Male. Partial. Just enough genetic material to confirm that another person had been present during whatever happened beside that car. But not enough to identify him. Not enough to match anyone in the national database. The man behind the pickup truck had left a fingerprint in blood. And then vanished into the dark. The case exploded after that announcement. News anchors began using phrases like mystery attacker and unknown suspect. Tip lines flooded with calls. People reported suspicious trucks. Strange men seen at gas stations. Arguments overheard in bars. Every rumor, every whisper became a potential thread investigators had to pull. Most of them went nowhere. But one lead sent detectives down a road that would haunt the investigation for years. A woman named Rachel Donovan contacted the sheriff's office after watching the evening news. She claimed something strange had happened to her the same night Emily disappeared. Rachel lived in a neighboring county, about 20 miles south. Around 11:40 p.m., she had been driving home from work when she noticed a pickup truck tailgating her aggressively along a rural highway. The driver stayed close. Too close. Close enough that the headlights filled her rearview mirror like twin white suns. Rachel tried slowing down. The truck slowed with her. She sped up. The truck sped up too. Finally, she turned sharply into a brightly lit gas station. The truck roared past without stopping. Rachel remembered one detail vividly. A cracked right headlight. Investigators returned to the grain facility footage immediately. They zoomed into the truck again. The image remained blurry, but something new emerged under the enhanced contrast. The right headlight did appear slightly dimmer. Possibly damaged. Possibly cracked. The clue triggered a massive search. Law enforcement agencies across 3 counties began checking vehicle repair shops, junkyards, and DMV records for trucks matching that description. Thousands of possibilities. Thousands of dead ends. Weeks turned into months. Winter crept across the Ohio fields. The search parties stopped combing the farmland once the ground froze solid beneath the snow. Emily Carter's posters faded in the cold wind. But her family refused to stop looking. Her father walked the same stretch of County Road 18 almost every weekend, staring out across the empty fields, as if the answer might still be hiding somewhere between the rows of corn stubble. Her mother continued calling Emily's phone every night before bed. The calls went straight to voicemail. But she kept dialing anyway. Detectives continued working the case, but the investigation had begun to stall. The pickup truck remained unidentified. The partial DNA profile had no match. No witnesses came forward who could place a specific person near Emily's car. The mystery remained sealed inside that 15-minute window. Then, nearly 5 months after Emily disappeared, the case took its first truly chilling turn. A construction crew repairing a bridge outside town made a discovery in the mud beneath the overpass. A small plastic bag. Inside it, wrapped tightly in a piece of cloth, was something that made the workers step back in shock. A silver charm bracelet. Bent. Broken. Stained with old, darkened blood. The same bracelet investigators had found snapped in half beside Emily's car. Except this piece wasn't supposed to exist. Because the original bracelet was already locked in an evidence bag at the sheriff's office. Which meant someone had taken the missing half. Kept it. And months later, dropped it miles away from the original crime scene. Not hidden. Not buried. Left where it could be found. Almost like a message. Almost like someone wanted investigators to know something terrifying. The person responsible for Emily Carter's disappearance wasn't gone. He was still out there. Still watching the investigation unfold. Still close enough to walk into the shadows beneath a bridge. And place a piece of the crime back into the world. The moment the second half of the bracelet surfaced beneath that bridge, the investigation changed tone. Until then, Emily Carter's disappearance had been treated as a mystery, possibly violent, possibly tragic, but still open to different interpretations. A roadside encounter. A stranger passing through. A crime that happened fast and vanished into the darkness of rural Ohio. But the bracelet told a different story. Because someone had kept it. 4 months. Not thrown away. Not lost in panic. Not buried with a body somewhere deep in the farmland. Someone had held onto it. And then, long after the search teams had gone home and the news cameras had moved on, they had returned quietly in the middle of the night and placed that missing piece where it would eventually be discovered. Not hidden well. Just hidden enough. It felt deliberate. It felt controlled. And it sent a chill through every investigator who touched the case file. Inside the sheriff's office, the evidence table slowly filled with the strange relics of that October night. The broken bracelet halves now reunited, the single sneaker found beside the car, the matching shoe discovered miles away, the photographs of Emily's vehicle sitting alone on County Road 18 with its door open like a silent scream into the dark. Every item told a fragment of the story. None of them told the whole thing. Detective Laura Bennett, newly assigned to assist the investigation in early 2008, would later say that the bracelet discovery was the moment she realized they weren't chasing a random attacker. They were chasing someone who was watching them back. Bennett had worked violent crime for nearly a decade before arriving in the county. She had seen staged crime scenes before. Killers leaving behind symbolic objects, returning to scenes, inserting themselves into investigations. It wasn't common. But when it happened, it meant something deeply unsettling. The offender didn't just want to get away. He wanted control. And the bracelet felt like control. The FBI analysts studying the case agreed. Behavioral reports suggested the person responsible for Emily's disappearance might still live nearby. Someone familiar with the rural landscape, comfortable moving through it unnoticed. Someone who knew how law enforcement operated. The idea that the suspect might be local spread through the town like a slow-moving storm. Every pickup truck suddenly looked suspicious. Every neighbor became a question mark. Conversations at grocery stores dropped into whispers when strangers walked past. People who had lived beside one another for decades began locking doors they had never bothered to lock before. And all the while, the case continued to drift deeper into uncertainty. Detectives re-examined the truck footage again and again. They mapped every registered dark pickup truck within 50 miles. Hundreds of owners were contacted. Many voluntarily allowed investigators to inspect their vehicles. Cracked headlights. Repaired headlights. Replaced headlights. Every possible match was examined. None of them stuck. The truck remained a ghost. But the investigation took another turn when analysts reviewed Emily's cell phone data more closely. The phone had been found on the floorboard of her car, screen cracked slightly, battery still half full. At first, detectives assumed it had simply fallen during a struggle. But deeper analysis revealed something strange. At 11:19 p.m., 2 minutes after the grain facility camera captured the vehicles, Emily's phone briefly connected to a nearby cell tower before losing signal completely. That in itself wasn't unusual in rural areas. But the tower data showed something else. Another phone had connected to the same tower at exactly the same moment. A prepaid device. One with no registered owner. Burner phone. The connection lasted only 20 seconds. Then it disappeared. Investigators tried to trace the signal path across nearby towers, hoping to map the direction the phone traveled afterward. But the device never connected again. It had been switched off or destroyed. Whoever used it had activated the phone for less than half a minute, just long enough to send or receive something, and then erased it from the network entirely. The timing was impossible to ignore. 2 minutes after Emily's car appeared on camera. 2 minutes before the truck likely closed the distance behind her. 20 seconds of communication that investigators could never hear. What was said during that call, or message, would remain one of the most frustrating mysteries of the case. The possibility emerged that Emily hadn't been randomly targeted at all. She might have been lured. Detectives started reviewing her last week of activity in microscopic detail. Every class attendance record. Every hospital shift. Every person she interacted with. They discovered she had received 3 calls from an unknown number earlier that evening. Each one lasted only a few seconds. Short enough to be mistaken for wrong numbers. But the number belonged to the same prepaid phone that briefly appeared near County Road 18. Which meant someone had tried to reach Emily just hours before she vanished. The discovery hit investigators like a jolt of electricity. If Emily had answered one of those calls, even briefly, it might explain why she ended up slowing down on that rural road. Why she might have pulled over. Why the truck had been waiting behind her. But the phone held no recording of the conversation. Just timestamps. Silent evidence of a contact that led straight into darkness. Detectives searched Emily's apartment next. They combed through notebooks and drawers, hoping she had written something down, an unfamiliar name, a number scribbled in the margins of her textbooks. But the apartment looked exactly the way someone would leave it if they expected to come home that night. Laundry folded neatly on the bed. A half-finished grocery list on the kitchen counter. A framed photo of her parents sitting beside a stack of nursing textbooks. There were no signs she had planned to meet anyone. No hint she was involved in something dangerous. But Bennett kept returning to the same troubling idea. If someone had used a burner phone to contact Emily that night, they probably knew her well enough to expect she would answer. Which meant the suspect might not have been a stranger at all. Someone she trusted. Someone whose voice she would recognize. The possibility made every interview conducted in the early days of the investigation feel suddenly incomplete. Detectives began reopening conversations with people who had already been cleared. Friends. Classmates. Neighbors. Even employees at the diner where she had stopped for coffee. One of those follow-up interviews produced a detail that investigators had missed months earlier. The waitress who served Emily that night remembered something new. At first she hadn't mentioned it because it seemed trivial. But under careful questioning, the memory resurfaced. Emily had looked at her phone several times while sitting in the booth. Not unusual. But at one point, she had frowned slightly, almost confused. Then she stepped outside briefly before returning to finish her coffee. The waitress assumed she had taken a call. Or maybe stepped out for fresh air. But security cameras outside the diner showed something else. Emily had walked into the parking lot. Stopped beside her car. And looked around. As if expecting someone to be there. But no one appeared. After a few seconds, she climbed back inside the diner. Investigators stared at the footage in silence. Because that tiny moment suggested something deeply unsettling. Emily might have been waiting for someone that night. Someone who never showed up at the diner. Someone who instead followed her out onto the road. Someone who had already begun drawing her into a trap that would end just 3 miles away on County Road 18. And somewhere beyond the fields and quiet farmhouses of Ohio, that person was still out there. Still driving. Still living. Still carrying the memory of the night a nursing student slowed her car on a dark rural road. And disappeared into a mystery that refused to die. By the spring of 2008, the Emily Carter investigation had already begun to drift into the dangerous territory every detective fears. A case with more questions than answers, more theories than evidence, and a timeline that seemed to dissolve the harder investigators tried to hold on to it. But Detective Laura Bennett refused to let the trail go cold. She returned again and again to the same question that had begun haunting the investigation since the discovery of the burner phone. Who had called Emily that night? Because whoever used that prepaid device knew something very specific about her routine. They knew she would be out late. They knew the road she would take home. And somehow, they had positioned themselves perfectly behind her car just minutes before she vanished. That wasn't luck. That was planning. The team decided to reconstruct Emily's final evening with brutal precision. Every movement. Every minute. Every interaction. They started at the beginning of the day. Emily woke up around 7 a.m., according to the alarm clock still blinking on her bedside table. Her morning classes began at 8. Security cameras from the college parking lot showed her arriving on time, coffee in hand, wearing the same white sneakers investigators had later recovered near her car. Friends described the day as ordinary. She laughed during lunch with classmates. She studied in the library during the afternoon. She texted her mother around 6:12 p.m. to say she would be staying late to finish an assignment. Nothing strange. Nothing alarming. Then, shortly after 9:45 p.m., Emily left campus. That was when the timeline started tightening like a noose. Phone records confirmed that at 9:51 p.m., Emily received the first call from the unknown prepaid number. The call lasted 4 seconds. Too short to be a full conversation. Possibly just enough time to hear a voice. Or recognize it. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Another short call. 6 seconds this time. Then silence. Emily continued driving. At 10:17 p.m., traffic cameras captured her car passing through the intersection near the diner. She pulled into the parking lot at 10:22 p.m. Inside, the waitress remembered her sitting quietly, flipping through textbooks while sipping coffee. But at 10:36 p.m., Emily's phone lit up again. The third call from the same prepaid device. This one lasted 11 seconds. Long enough for something to be said. Long enough for instructions to be given. Just minutes later, Emily stepped outside into the diner parking lot and looked around as if she expected someone to be there. But the lot remained empty. When she returned to her booth, she seemed distracted. The waitress remembered that too. Emily paid her bill quickly after that. At 11:04 p.m., she walked out the door. 7 minutes later, her car passed the gas station camera. And then came the image that would define the case forever. Emily's headlights on County Road 18. The dark pickup truck behind her. Closing in. Detectives studied the sequence over and over. Because something about it didn't feel random. The truck wasn't weaving. It wasn't behaving like an aggressive stranger tailgating for no reason. It was steady. Controlled. Intentional. Almost as if the driver knew exactly when Emily would appear on that road. Almost as if he had been waiting. The deeper investigators dug into Emily's life, the more they began to realize how exposed that routine had made her. She drove the same route home after night classes, stopped at the same diner occasionally, parked in the same section of the campus lot. To someone watching carefully, her movements would have been easy to predict. And that thought pushed detectives toward a disturbing possibility. What if Emily had been observed for days? Or weeks? Maybe even longer. Someone could have watched her leave campus multiple nights, learned her schedule, studied the quiet road she preferred instead of the highway, waited for the perfect moment when the traffic would be thin and the darkness deep enough to hide whatever happened next. Investigators began asking another question. Had anyone else noticed something unusual before Emily disappeared? They reopened the tip line and combed through hundreds of calls that had been logged during the first chaotic weeks of the search. Most were vague. Some were clearly false leads. But buried among them was one call that had received little attention at the time. A teenage boy named Evan Larkin had reported seeing a truck parked along County Road 18 several nights before Emily vanished. He had been driving home from a friend's house around midnight when he noticed the vehicle sitting with its headlights off near the same stretch where Emily's car would later be found. Evan thought it was strange because the truck didn't move as he passed. It just sat there, engine running, waiting. When detectives interviewed him again, months later, Evan described the moment more clearly. The truck was dark. Extended cab. Older model. Exactly like the one captured on the grain facility camera. But the most unsettling detail came when he described the driver. At first, Evan said he couldn't see much. The interior of the truck was dark. But as he passed, the dashboard briefly lit up. Just long enough to reveal a silhouette behind the wheel. A man. Alone. Staring straight ahead at the road. Not moving. Not looking at Evan's car as it passed. Just watching the empty stretch of pavement. As if he expected someone to arrive eventually. The implication was chilling. If Evan's memory was accurate, the driver might have been scouting that road days before Emily disappeared. Learning the traffic patterns. Testing the isolation. Planning. And if that was true, the crime wasn't spontaneous. It was calculated. That possibility triggered another massive search. Investigators began examining every known offender living within driving distance. Men with histories of stalking, kidnapping, sexual assault. Anyone who owned or had previously owned a truck matching the description. Dozens of names surfaced. Interviews followed. Background checks. Vehicle inspections. One by one, each suspect was eliminated. Alibis checked out. Trucks didn't match. DNA samples ruled people out. Months passed. The suspect list shrank again. And the investigation slid deeper into the slow, grinding frustration that defines so many cold cases. But one detail continued to bother Detective Bennett. Something small. Something easy to overlook. The position of Emily's car. Crime scene photos showed it angled slightly toward the ditch, not perfectly parallel with the road like someone would normally park. Almost as if she had stopped abruptly. Or swerved. Forensic reconstruction suggested Emily may have slowed suddenly before pulling onto the gravel shoulder. But why? Had the truck forced her off the road? Or had she stopped voluntarily? If she recognized the driver, if she trusted him even for a moment, it might explain why she opened the door and stepped out of the car. That single possibility hung over the entire case like a shadow. Because if Emily had stepped out willingly, even briefly, it meant the person responsible might have been someone she never imagined could hurt her. Someone familiar. Someone close. And somewhere out there, that person was still carrying the secret of what happened during those 15 minutes on County Road 18. A secret buried so deeply in the darkness of that October night that even years later, investigators could still feel its presence lingering on that quiet road. Waiting. Silent. Unanswered. By the summer of 2008, the investigation into Emily Carter's disappearance had already consumed thousands of hours. Detectives had interviewed more than 300 people, examined hundreds of vehicles, and chased leads that stretched across several states. Yet the case remained frozen inside that same haunting 15-minute window on County Road 18. And the silence surrounding it was beginning to feel unnatural. In small towns, people talk. Secrets rarely stay buried forever. Someone eventually hears something, sees something, slips and says the wrong thing at the wrong time. But in the Emily Carter case, the silence was absolute. No confessions. No reliable sightings. No truck. Just an abandoned car, a few pieces of evidence, and the growing weight of a mystery that refused to loosen its grip on the community. Detective Laura Bennett started approaching the investigation from a different angle. Instead of asking who might have attacked Emily that night, she began asking a darker question. Who had something to gain from her disappearance? It was a difficult theory to pursue. Emily didn't appear to have enemies. Her life, by every account, was steady and ordinary. Nursing school, part-time hospital shifts, family dinners, quiet weekends. But sometimes ordinary lives hide quiet tensions beneath the surface. Bennett dug deeper into Emily's relationships. Friends described her as responsible, focused, maybe even a little private about certain things. Not secretive in a suspicious way, but careful about her personal life. One friend mentioned that Emily had seemed distracted during the week leading up to her disappearance. Not frightened. Just preoccupied. When detectives asked what she meant, the friend struggled to explain. Emily had checked her phone often. More often than usual. And once during lunch, she had said something strange. Just a small comment, almost thrown away between bites of a sandwich. Some people don't know when to leave things alone. At the time, it hadn't sounded serious. Now it sounded different. Detectives pressed further, but the friend didn't know who Emily had been referring to. Another student mentioned something else. Emily had received flowers at the hospital a few weeks earlier. No card. Just a small bouquet delivered to the nurse's station. When co-workers teased her about a secret admirer, Emily laughed it off. She said it was probably a mistake. But no one had come forward to claim them. It might have meant nothing. Or it might have meant someone had been trying to get her attention long before that October night. Investigators followed that thread carefully. They spoke with the hospital staff, who worked the same shifts as Emily. One name surfaced repeatedly. A security guard named Daniel Mercer. Mercer was 32 years old, quiet, polite, the kind of employee people described as reliable but distant. He worked overnight security in the hospital parking structure. Which meant he often saw Emily arriving or leaving for her evening shifts. Several nurses remembered Mercer talking to her occasionally. Small conversations. Nothing unusual. But one co-worker recalled a moment that now seemed slightly off. About a month before Emily disappeared, Mercer had asked where she usually studied after late classes. Emily had shrugged and said sometimes she stopped at the diner near the highway. The same diner she visited the night she vanished. The connection made detectives pause. They pulled Mercer's employment records. He had worked the night shift on October 12. Or at least, that's what the time card showed. But when investigators reviewed the hospital's security footage from that night, something caught their attention. At 10:05 p.m., Mercer was seen leaving the building through the staff entrance. He returned at 11:58 p.m. Almost 2 hours unaccounted for. The time gap sat directly over the window when Emily disappeared. Detectives felt the case tighten. Mercer owned a pickup truck. Dark blue. Extended cab. Older model. Their pulse quickened as they checked the vehicle registration. The truck had been sold 3 weeks earlier. According to the paperwork, Mercer had reported mechanical issues and traded it to a used car lot outside town. When detectives located the dealership, they discovered the truck had already been resold to a buyer in another county. The new owner allowed investigators to inspect it immediately. The truck matched the general description from the grain facility footage. Extended cab. Dark color. But the headlights had been replaced recently. Both of them. Brand new. That detail made investigators lean closer. They asked the new owner about the repairs. He said the dealership replaced the headlights before selling the vehicle. Standard practice, they claimed. Routine maintenance. But when detectives asked to see the original repair invoice, the dealership couldn't produce one. Records had been misplaced. The explanation felt thin. Detectives brought Mercer in for questioning. The interview lasted 6 hours. He remained calm the entire time. Mercer admitted leaving work briefly that night, but insisted he had gone to visit a friend in the next town. When detectives asked for the friend's name, Mercer hesitated. Then gave it. The friend confirmed the visit. But something about the timeline didn't quite line up. Mercer claimed he arrived around 10:30 p.m. Phone data suggested his device had traveled in a different direction before reaching the friend's house. Closer to County Road 18. Closer to the place where Emily's car had been found. When confronted with the inconsistency, Mercer said his phone signal must have bounced between towers. A common occurrence in rural areas. Technically possible. But the explanation felt rehearsed. Investigators asked about the flowers sent to Emily at the hospital. Mercer denied knowing anything about them. They asked about the diner. He admitted he knew where it was but said he rarely ate there. They asked if he had ever followed Emily. His answer was immediate. No. The word hung in the interrogation room like a dropped stone. Flat. Certain. Emotionless. Then detectives asked the question that made the air shift slightly. Did he own a prepaid phone? Mercer's expression flickered for the first time. Just a fraction of a second. A blink too long. But he recovered quickly. No. Investigators searched his home with a warrant the following day. They examined every drawer, every closet, every digital device. No burner phone. No physical evidence connecting him directly to Emily's disappearance. And his DNA did not match the partial male profile recovered from the blood on her car door. That result landed like a punch to the gut. Mercer remained suspicious. But suspicion alone wasn't enough. Without a DNA match, without the truck confirmed as the one in the footage, detectives had no grounds to charge him. He walked out of the station a free man. And just like that, the most promising lead in the case dissolved back into uncertainty. But Detective Bennett couldn't shake a feeling about Mercer. Something in his calmness. Something in the way his answers never quite wandered outside the lines of what investigators already knew. It felt practiced. Careful. As if he understood exactly how much information they had, and exactly how far he could push without crossing into a contradiction. Weeks passed. The investigation slowed again. Emily Carter's disappearance officially entered its second year. Posters faded. News coverage shrank to occasional anniversary segments. But every so often, Bennett would drive out to County Road 18 late at night. She would park near the same gravel shoulder where Emily's car had been discovered and sit there listening to the wind sweep across the empty fields. Trying to imagine what happened in those missing 15 minutes. Trying to picture the truck pulling closer. Trying to understand the moment when a young woman stepped out of her car on a quiet Ohio road and encountered the person who would erase her from the world. Somewhere out there, that person was still breathing the same night air. Still walking through grocery stores. Still passing strangers on the street. Carrying a secret so heavy that even years later, the entire town could still feel its shadow stretching across County Road 18. By the time the case entered its third year, the energy surrounding Emily Carter's disappearance had begun to thin, like fog slowly lifting from a field. The search parties were gone. The television trucks had long since rolled away. Even the flyers taped to telephone poles had faded until Emily's face looked like a ghost staring out from peeling paper. But inside the sheriff's office, the case never truly went quiet. Detective Laura Bennett kept Emily's file close to her desk, a thick stack of reports, photographs, and witness statements that had slowly grown into something resembling a map of unanswered questions. Every time she flipped through it, the same unsettling feeling returned. Something about this crime was too careful. Too controlled. It wasn't the chaotic violence investigators often saw in roadside attacks. There were no scattered personal belongings, no frantic trail of blood, no obvious signs of panic. Instead, there was that eerie absence. Emily's purse untouched on the passenger seat. Her phone dropped neatly on the floorboard. The driver's door open. A single sneaker on the gravel. And then nothing. It was almost as if the person responsible had stepped in, removed Emily from the scene, and vanished with mechanical precision. Like someone who had thought through every step before it happened. That idea pushed Bennett toward a theory she had been quietly considering for months. What if the attacker had practiced? What if County Road 18 wasn't chosen randomly? What if the person responsible had spent time on that road before the night Emily disappeared? The memory of Evan Larkin's statement, the teenage driver, who had seen a pickup truck parked along that same stretch days earlier, returned with renewed weight. Bennett pulled traffic reports from the County Highway Department, searching for anything unusual in the weeks leading up to October 12. At first the records seemed useless. Rural roads didn't generate much documentation, unless there was construction or an accident. But buried inside a maintenance log from late September was something interesting. A county worker had reported a vehicle repeatedly parked along the shoulder near mile marker 7 on County Road 18. Same location where Emily's car would later be found. The worker had noticed it 3 times during his morning route. Dark pickup truck. Engine off. No driver visible. The truck was gone each time he passed again later in the day. At the time, no one thought it mattered. Farmers often left vehicles along rural roads while checking fields. But now the detail took on a different shape. If someone had been observing the road, learning its rhythms, they could have discovered something important. Between 11 p.m. and midnight, traffic on that stretch dropped almost to zero. No gas stations. No street lights. Just miles of farmland and darkness. The perfect place to stop a car without witnesses. Detectives reopened the question of surveillance. Had Emily been watched? Had someone spent weeks preparing for the exact moment when she would drive alone down that empty road? The possibility made the crime feel colder, more deliberate, more personal. Meanwhile, forensic analysts continued studying the small amount of blood recovered from the car door. The partial male DNA profile remained incomplete, but new testing techniques allowed them to extract additional fragments of genetic information. Not enough for a full identification, but enough to narrow certain characteristics. The unknown male likely had European ancestry. Brown hair. Possibly light eyes. The data didn't provide a name, but it painted the faint outline of a person. A real human being somewhere out there whose DNA had touched Emily Carter's blood. When detectives compared the profile against the growing national DNA database again, they still found no match. Which suggested something important. The man responsible might never have been arrested for a serious crime before. He might have been invisible to law enforcement until that night. That idea was unsettling in its simplicity. It meant the person behind the disappearance might be someone who blended easily into everyday life. Someone who had managed to live quietly, unnoticed, even after committing something terrible. And if that were true, he might still be living within driving distance of County Road 18. Another strange detail surfaced during the continued analysis of Emily's phone. Investigators had always assumed the device fell during a struggle. But digital forensic experts discovered that the phone had attempted to unlock itself once after hitting the ground. The motion sensor triggered the screen. For 3 seconds, the display lit up. Just long enough for the internal system to record something chilling. A partial reflection captured by the front camera. The image quality was terrible. Blurry. Dark. But when technicians enhanced the frame, they noticed a shape hovering above the phone. A figure leaning toward the open car door. Not clear enough to identify a face, but enough to confirm something detectives had suspected all along. Someone had been standing right there beside Emily's vehicle. Someone close enough for their shadow to fall across the phone's glass. Investigators studied the image endlessly, adjusting light levels, trying to sharpen the silhouette. The figure appeared tall. Broad shoulders. Possibly wearing a jacket. The outline of an arm extended downward. Toward the open door. Toward where Emily had been moments earlier. The image became one of the most disturbing pieces of evidence in the entire investigation. Because it captured the presence of the unknown person at the exact moment the scene was still unfolding. A ghost frozen inside a reflection. Watching. Reaching. Taking control of the moment. And then disappearing into the darkness beyond the camera's tiny lens. As the years passed, the case slowly transformed into something else. A legend whispered around town. Teenagers driving past County Road 18 late at night sometimes claimed they felt strange there. As if the road remembered something terrible. As if the fields themselves held a secret. Emily's parents continued living in the same house. Her bedroom remained untouched. Her textbooks still stacked neatly on the desk. Her car sat in the driveway for years after it was released from evidence, the quiet machine that had carried her to the edge of a mystery no one could solve. Sometimes neighbors said they saw her mother standing at the kitchen window late at night, looking out at the empty street. Waiting. Hoping. Because somewhere beyond those quiet Ohio fields, the man who had stepped into Emily Carter's life for 15 violent minutes was still out there. Still breathing. Still remembering the moment he stood beside an open car door on a dark rural road. And watched a life vanish into silence, time has a strange way of reshaping a mystery. In the beginning, the Emily Carter case had been loud. Flashing lights, helicopters sweeping over farmland, reporters speaking in urgent voices about a young woman who had vanished on a quiet Ohio road. But as the years passed, the noise faded. The town returned to its routines. The diner still served coffee late into the night. Cars still rolled down County Road 18 under the same dark sky. And yet something invisible had changed. Because everyone who lived there knew the story. Everyone knew that somewhere along that lonely stretch of pavement, something violent had happened, and no one had ever been able to explain it. For investigators, the case had entered its most dangerous phase. The cold phase. Not closed. Not forgotten. Just slowly drifting further away from the night it began. Detective Laura Bennett refused to let that happen. By 2010, she had reviewed the file so many times that she could recite the timeline without looking at the pages. 10:22 p.m., Emily arrives at the diner. 10:36 p.m., the third call from the burner phone. 11:04 p.m., she leaves. 11:11 p.m., her car passes the gas station camera. 11:17 p.m., the grain facility captures the pickup truck behind her. 11:25 p.m., the sound of engines racing past Harold Green's farmhouse. 11:32 p.m., the truck driver reports the abandoned car. 15 minutes. A sliver of time that continued to mock every effort to solve the case. Bennett decided to revisit something investigators had mostly dismissed in the early months. The possibility that Emily had been communicating with someone secretly. Not a public relationship. Not something her family or friends knew about. But someone who had entered her life quietly. Someone who might have been using that prepaid phone. Digital forensics had come a long way since 2007. Bennett contacted specialists who could recover fragments of deleted data from Emily's laptop and email accounts. The process took weeks. Then one afternoon, a technician called with something interesting. Not a message. Not a name. Just a pattern. In the month before Emily disappeared, her laptop had connected several times to a temporary email service that erased messages automatically after reading. A service designed specifically to leave no trace. The account itself had already vanished. But connection logs still existed. Someone had been exchanging messages with Emily using that system. And those messages had been opened late at night. Often after midnight. Sometimes just minutes after Emily returned home from studying. The discovery electrified the investigation. If Emily had been communicating with someone secretly, that person might be the same one who called her from the burner phone the night she vanished. But without the messages themselves, investigators were staring at shadows. They needed a name. They needed a face. They needed someone who had reason to hide those conversations. Detectives began quietly re-interviewing Emily's closest friends again. At first, everyone repeated the same answers they had given years earlier. Emily wasn't seeing anyone seriously. She hadn't mentioned a new relationship. But one friend hesitated when Bennett asked about the late-night messages. Her name was Lindsay Moore, a nursing student who had shared several classes with Emily. At first Lindsay insisted she didn't know anything. Then she remembered something small. Something that had seemed unimportant at the time. One night a few weeks before Emily disappeared, the two of them had been studying together at the library. Emily's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages. Lindsay teased her about it. Secret boyfriend. Emily laughed, but the reaction felt nervous. She said it was just someone she had met online. Nothing serious. When Lindsay asked who it was, Emily changed the subject. That moment had passed quickly. Now it felt different. Investigators tried to trace the anonymous email account Emily had accessed, but the service was designed to leave almost no record. The IP addresses used to log in had been routed through public networks. Coffee shops. Libraries. Places where anyone could connect without leaving a name. The person behind the messages had known exactly how to hide. Which made Bennett ask another unsettling question. What if the anonymous contact had been manipulating Emily? Online relationships had become a growing tactic for predators by that time, people who built trust through secret conversations, slowly drawing victims into private meetings. If that had happened here, it might explain the burner phone. It might explain why Emily stepped outside the diner parking lot looking for someone who never appeared. It might even explain why she slowed down on County Road 18. But the theory raised a darker possibility too. What if Emily realized something was wrong only at the last moment? What if the truck behind her wasn't just someone following randomly, but the person she had been speaking with for weeks? Someone she trusted enough to answer the phone. Someone who knew exactly where she would be that night. Detectives started examining internet usage logs from public places across the county. Libraries first. One location stood out. The Willow Creek Public Library, less than 10 minutes from the diner. Records showed an anonymous user had accessed the same temporary email service several times during the month Emily had used it. The logins occurred in the late afternoon. Always between 4 o'clock and 5 p.m. Always from the same computer terminal. Library staff were asked if they remembered anyone regularly using that machine during that time frame. At first no one was certain. But after reviewing old schedules, one librarian recalled something. A man who visited almost every weekday. Quiet. Polite. Kept mostly to himself. He usually sat at the far computer near the window. She remembered him because he wore the same dark baseball cap every day. When detectives asked for a description, the librarian hesitated before answering. Tall, she said. Broad shoulders. Something about that description made the room fall silent. Because it matched the vague silhouette captured in the reflection on Emily's phone screen. The man at the library had signed in using guest passes. No ID required. No name recorded. Just a digital trace left behind in the library's system. Another ghost. Another shadow in the investigation. But now the case had a new dimension. Someone had been communicating with Emily secretly. Someone had been careful enough to hide their identity online. Someone who might have been watching her routine long before the night she disappeared. And somewhere out there, that person still carried the memory of those messages. The conversations that began in quiet digital whispers and ended on a dark Ohio road where a young woman stepped out of her car and never returned. By 2011, 4 years had passed since the night Emily Carter disappeared on County Road 18. 4 years of interviews, evidence analysis, and theories that twisted in circles before collapsing under the weight of uncertainty. 4 years of detectives returning again and again to the same lonely road, staring out across the same silent farmland, as if the ground itself might eventually give up the truth. But the truth stayed buried. And the longer the mystery lingered, the stranger the case began to feel. Because someone out there knew exactly what had happened. Someone had stood beside that open car door. Someone had left behind blood, broken jewelry, and a single shoe. Someone had taken Emily Carter from the world and vanished without leaving a trail. Detective Laura Bennett had reached a point in the investigation where instinct began to matter as much as evidence. Facts alone hadn't solved the case. But instincts kept pointing her in one direction. Toward the unknown man from the library. The silent visitor, who logged into the temporary email system during the same weeks Emily had been exchanging secret messages. He had never signed his name. Never shown identification. Just a quiet figure sitting at a computer terminal near the window every afternoon between 4 and 5. The library staff couldn't remember his face clearly anymore. Time had blurred their memory. But one detail stayed consistent in every description. The man drove a pickup truck. Dark-colored. Older model. The same vague description that had haunted the case since the beginning. Investigators pulled every security record they could find from the Willow Creek Public Library, hoping one of the cameras had captured the mysterious visitor. But there was a problem. In 2007, the library surveillance system recorded over itself every 2 weeks. Anything older had long since vanished. Another ghost in the investigation. Another door closed by time. But Bennett refused to let the lead die completely. If the man visited the library regularly, someone else in the area might remember him. Detectives began canvassing nearby businesses. Coffee shops. Convenience stores. Gas stations along the road leading to the library. Most employees had no memory of anything unusual. Years had passed. Faces blurred together. But one gas station clerk recalled something strange. A man who came in often during the fall of 2007. Always alone. Always quiet. He drove a dark blue pickup truck with a dent along the passenger side. And he always paid with cash. That detail alone might not have meant much. But when detectives asked when the man stopped coming to the store, the clerk answered without hesitation. Right after that girl disappeared. The statement sent a ripple through the investigation. Because if the man from the library and the man from the gas station were the same person, his behavior had changed abruptly after October 12. Almost as if he had suddenly decided it was time to disappear. Detectives asked the clerk if he remembered anything else. Anything at all. The man's voice. An accent. A name spoken during a transaction. The clerk thought carefully before answering. There was one thing, he said slowly. His hand. Detectives leaned forward. What about it? The clerk rubbed his own knuckles, as if trying to recreate the memory. There was a scar across the back of it. Looked old. Like maybe a burn or something. It wasn't much. But it was something. A physical detail. Something that could identify a real person if investigators ever found him. Bennett added the description to the growing suspect profile. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dark pickup truck. Scar across the back of the right hand. Possibly familiar with computers and anonymous email services. Comfortable moving through the area without drawing attention. The list of possible suspects shrank slightly. But still no one matched every piece of the puzzle. Meanwhile, another small piece of evidence quietly surfaced during a review of old case materials. It came from the original search teams, who combed the farmland around County Road 18 during the first week after Emily vanished. At the time, the discovery seemed insignificant. Just another item logged and forgotten. But years later, Bennett noticed something unusual about it. A metal button. Found in the grass about 20 yards from where Emily's car had been parked. The button had likely fallen from a jacket or coat during the struggle. It wasn't part of Emily's clothing. which meant it likely belonged to the person who attacked her. For years the object had sat quietly in an evidence bag. Just another tiny artifact in a sea of unanswered questions. But when forensic technicians examined it again under higher magnification, they discovered something new. Traces of dark fiber embedded inside the metal rim. Material from the fabric it had once been attached to. The fibers were synthetic. Part of a heavy-duty work jacket. Possibly something worn by mechanics, construction workers, or maintenance employees. The discovery fit neatly into the suspect profile forming around the mysterious man from the library. Someone who worked with his hands. Someone comfortable around vehicles. Someone who might carry a scar across the back of his hand. Someone who drove a truck. The deeper investigators looked, the more the shape of a person seemed to emerge from the darkness. But that shape still had no name. No address. No face clear enough to identify. Meanwhile, the Carter family continued living with the quiet, relentless absence that had filled their home since 2007. Emily's father stopped reopening the hardware store early in the mornings. He said the silence reminded him too much of the hours before the police had arrived that day. Her mother continued organizing small community events each year on the anniversary of Emily's disappearance. Candlelight vigils. Prayer gatherings. Moments where the town could stand together and remember the young woman whose life had been interrupted so violently. Each year, the candles flickered in the cold October wind along the edge of County Road 18. And each year, the same question hovered unspoken in the air. Who did this? Because somewhere out there, the man with the scarred hand and the dark pickup truck was still living his life. Still waking up in the morning. Still driving past strangers who had no idea what he had done. Still carrying the secret of a night when a young nursing student stepped out of her car on a quiet Ohio road and vanished into a mystery that refused to fade away. By the time the Emily Carter case reached its 5th year, the investigation had become something heavier than a simple missing person file. It had grown into a quiet weight that hung over the county, an unsolved story everyone knew but no one could finish. In the sheriff's office, the file had expanded into several thick binders filled with reports, photographs, and interview transcripts. Names were circled. Maps were drawn and redrawn. Timelines had been rewritten dozens of times. But every path led back to the same dark stretch of County Road 18. The same 15 minutes. And the same unknown man, who had slipped through every attempt to identify him. Detective Laura Bennett began studying the case from a new perspective, geography. Not the crime scene itself, that had been dissected countless times, but the area surrounding it. The roads that fed into County Road 18. The nearby farms. The small clusters of houses hidden behind tree lines and gravel driveways. If the attacker had planned the encounter carefully, he would have needed more than just a good location. He would have needed familiarity. A place nearby. Somewhere he could disappear quickly once the road went quiet again. Bennett began mapping every property within a 3-mile radius of the crime scene. Old farmhouses. Equipment sheds. Abandoned barns. Most of the land belonged to families who had lived there for generations. Detectives had interviewed many of them in the first weeks of the investigation. But one property drew Bennett's attention immediately. A small rental house sitting at the edge of a neglected cornfield about 2 miles from where Emily's car had been found. The house had changed tenants several times in the years surrounding the disappearance. But in 2007, the renter listed on the lease was a man named Thomas Keller. The name had appeared in the investigation before. Rarely. Just a short interview conducted during the early canvass of nearby residents. Keller had told deputies he was home asleep the night Emily disappeared. At the time, there had been no reason to doubt him. He lived alone. No criminal record. Worked irregular jobs doing equipment repair for local farms. The kind of quiet, temporary labor that rarely attracts attention. But now, looking at the map again, Bennett noticed something troubling. Keller's house sat less than 5 minutes from the exact spot where Emily's car had been abandoned. Close enough that someone could leave the scene quickly without being seen. Close enough that someone familiar with the area would know exactly how empty the road became after midnight. Bennett reopened Keller's file. The original interview transcript was brief. He claimed he had been watching television when he heard sirens passing down the road later that night. He said he didn't think much of it at the time. He didn't know Emily. He rarely left the house late at night. Everything about the statement felt simple. Too simple. Then Bennett noticed something else. Keller owned a pickup truck in 2007. Dark blue. Extended cab. Her pulse quickened as she dug deeper into the records. The truck had been sold in early 2008. Just a few months after Emily disappeared. Sold privately to a buyer who later moved out of state. The trail ended there. But another detail made the room go quiet. Keller's job involved repairing farm equipment and mechanical systems. Heavy-duty jackets. Metal buttons. Exactly the kind of clothing the fiber evidence suggested the attacker might have been wearing. Bennett requested Keller's employment history. He had worked briefly for several agricultural supply companies around the county, including one location less than a mile from the Willow Creek Public Library. The same library where the anonymous email user had logged in during the weeks before Emily vanished. The connections were still circumstantial, but they were beginning to form a shape. And then Bennett saw the photograph. A copy of Keller's driver's license from the time he rented the house. Tall. Broad shoulders. Short brown hair. Light-colored eyes. Almost perfectly matching the physical traits suggested by the partial DNA profile. Her heart began beating faster. Then she noticed the detail that made her sit back slowly in her chair. In the photograph, Keller's right hand rested partially in frame. And across the back of that hand, just visible near the knuckles, was a faint, jagged scar. The same detail the gas station clerk had remembered years earlier. The room felt suddenly smaller. The man who might have been communicating with Emily online. The man who might have been watching County Road 18. The man who might have driven the truck seen behind her car. Had been living only minutes away from the crime scene. Investigators moved quickly. But there was a problem. Thomas Keller no longer lived in the county. Records showed he had moved in 2009. 2 years after Emily's disappearance. His forwarding address led to another small town, nearly 300 miles away. Detectives contacted the local police department and requested assistance locating him. When officers arrived at the listed address, they found the house empty. Keller had moved again. This time, without leaving a forwarding address. The trail was beginning to feel familiar. Another shadow. Another person slipping quietly out of reach, just as the investigation started closing in. But Bennett wasn't ready to give up. She searched deeper through Keller's background. Employment records. Utility accounts. Vehicle registrations. Old medical files. And one detail jumped out immediately. In 2006, Keller had been treated at a small urgent care clinic for a severe burn on his right hand. A workplace accident involving welding equipment. The injury had required stitches. And it had left behind a scar. Exactly where the gas station clerk had described it. The pieces were starting to align with unsettling precision. But Bennett knew something important. Suspicion wasn't enough. Not in a case this old. Not in a crime where physical evidence had already grown thin with time. They needed DNA. The unknown male profile recovered from the blood on Emily's car door still sat in the evidence database, waiting for a match. If Keller was the man behind that truck, if he had been the one standing beside Emily's car that night, his DNA would finally reveal it. But first, they had to find him. And somewhere out there, Thomas Keller was still moving quietly through the world. Still driving roads. Still blending into small towns and ordinary lives. Still carrying the memory of a dark October night in 2007. When a young woman stepped out of her car on County Road 18 and vanished into the silence he left behind. When the name Thomas Keller resurfaced in the Emily Carter case file, it was like a door quietly creaking open in a room investigators had searched 100 times before. The pieces that had once seemed scattered across years of evidence suddenly began drifting toward one another. Not proof. Not yet. But something close to direction. Detective Laura Bennett understood the danger of false certainty. Cold cases often produced suspects who looked perfect on paper, but collapsed under scrutiny. She had seen that happen before, patterns appearing where none truly existed. But Keller felt different. Too many details aligned. The dark pickup truck. The house less than 5 minutes from County Road 18. The work jacket fibers consistent with the button found in the grass. The burn scar across the back of his right hand. The proximity to the library where anonymous emails had been sent to Emily. It wasn't enough to charge him. But it was enough to start hunting for him. Finding Keller turned out to be more difficult than anyone expected. After leaving Ohio in 2009, he had slipped into the kind of life that left very little digital trace. No social media accounts. No long-term employment records. Short-term mechanical work under temporary contracts. Cheap apartments rented month to month. The kind of lifestyle that made a man almost invisible in modern America. But invisible didn't mean non-existent. Bennett began working with federal investigators to reconstruct Keller's movements after he left the county. The first confirmed location was a small town in southern Indiana. He had worked there briefly at an agricultural equipment repair shop. The owner remembered him clearly. Quiet guy. Kept to himself. Worked hard. Then one day he simply stopped showing up. No warning. No explanation. That pattern repeated again in Kentucky 2 years later. Another repair shop. Another temporary job. Another quiet departure. Each move placed Keller deeper into rural regions where pickup trucks were common and strangers rarely asked too many questions. But the most unsettling detail came from a co-worker in Indiana who remembered something unusual about Keller. One evening after work, a group of mechanics had been sitting outside the shop drinking cheap beer and talking about the news. Someone mentioned a missing person case from another state. A young woman who had disappeared during a late-night drive. The conversation drifted into speculation the way those stories often do. Kidnapping. Runaway. Serial killer. But Keller had reacted differently. He had gone silent. Completely silent. Then, after a long pause, he said something strange. People vanish all the time, he muttered. Sometimes they just don't want to be found. The co-worker had laughed it off at the time. But years later, when detectives asked about Keller, the memory returned with an uncomfortable edge. Because the way Keller said it hadn't sounded like speculation. It had sounded like certainty. Meanwhile, investigators in Ohio began preparing for the moment they hoped would eventually come. A DNA comparison. The partial male profile recovered from the blood on Emily's car door had remained in the system for years, waiting. If Keller was located, all they needed was a reference sample. Hair. Saliva. Anything biological. Just one match could turn suspicion into evidence. But Keller remained out of reach. Months passed. Then nearly a year. The search expanded across several states. At times investigators felt they were chasing a shadow. But Bennett kept returning to the same thought. If Keller had committed the crime, he might have changed locations to avoid suspicion. But he hadn't disappeared entirely. People like him often drifted between similar kinds of work. Mechanical repairs. Farm equipment. Jobs where tools and grease replaced paperwork and formal hiring processes. So Bennett began contacting agricultural repair shops across multiple counties in several states. It was tedious work. Phone call after phone call. Most owners had never heard of Keller. Some didn't remember their employees from years earlier. But eventually one shop owner in western Pennsylvania paused when he heard the name. "Yeah," the man said slowly. "I think we had a Keller here for a while." The timeline matched roughly. Around 2013. He worked on tractors and irrigation systems. Quiet. Reliable. But the owner remembered something else. Keller had an old pickup truck parked behind the shop. Dark blue. Extended cab. And one of the headlights looked newer than the other. The detail landed like a shockwave. Because years earlier, the dealership that sold Keller's truck after Emily disappeared had replaced both headlights before reselling it. If Keller bought another truck afterward, the pattern felt eerily familiar. Investigators asked the shop owner if Keller still worked there. "No," he said. "Left a long time ago." "Where did he go?" The owner hesitated. "I don't know for sure, but he talked about heading west. Said he might try finding work in Colorado." Another trail. Another direction. The search widened again. Across state lines. Across thousands of miles. And still the memory of that October night remained frozen back in Ohio. County Road 18 looked exactly the same. The same dark ribbon of pavement cutting through farmland. The same quiet wind moving through the fields. The same place where a young woman's life had ended, or perhaps been taken somewhere no one had ever discovered. For Detective Bennett, the case had become more than a job. It had become unfinished business. Because somewhere out there, Thomas Keller was still moving through the world. Still carrying the memory of a night in 2007 when a pickup truck followed a silver sedan down a lonely road. Still remembering the moment when headlights illuminated an empty stretch of gravel. Still remembering the moment a young nursing student opened her car door and stepped into the darkness where he was waiting. By the time investigators began following the Colorado lead, nearly 8 years had passed since Emily Carter vanished on County Road 18. 8 years of quiet frustration, unanswered calls, and the slow erosion of a case that once dominated headlines across Ohio. But for Detective Laura Bennett, the story had never truly gone cold. Not in her mind. Not in the files stacked beside her desk. And certainly not in the quiet moments when she found herself staring at the photograph of Emily's abandoned car, the door open, the headlights cutting into the darkness like a frozen scream from the past. The name Thomas Keller had changed everything. Not because investigators could prove he was responsible, but because, for the first time in years, the mystery had a shape. A man who lived minutes from the crime scene. A man who owned a truck matching the one in the surveillance footage. A man whose physical features matched the partial DNA profile. A man who vanished from the area shortly after the disappearance. Now the investigation had one goal. Find him. The trail to Colorado began with something small, a repair invoice from a tractor dealership outside a town called Grand Junction. The document listed a mechanic hired temporarily in late 2014. Name, Thomas Keller. The shop owner remembered him clearly when investigators called. Keller had arrived looking for work, claiming he had experience repairing agricultural equipment. He kept to himself, spoke very little, and spent most evenings alone in a cheap motel near the highway. He worked there for 6 months. Then, one day, he packed up his tools and left. Just like he had done everywhere else. But this time, Keller left behind something unusual. A co-worker remembered borrowing a wrench from him shortly before he disappeared. Keller had been working beneath the hood of his truck when the co-worker noticed something strange in the vehicle's back seat. A cardboard box. Inside it were stacks of newspaper clippings. The co-worker hadn't paid much attention at first, until he noticed the photographs printed across the pages. The face of a young woman. Smiling. Blonde hair pulled back behind her shoulders. Emily Carter. The co-worker had asked Keller about the articles casually. Friend of yours, he joked. Keller's reaction had been immediate. Sharp. Defensive. He slammed the box shut and said it was just an old news story he followed years ago. Nothing else. The moment had been awkward enough that the co-worker remembered it clearly even years later. When detectives heard that detail, the silence in the room grew heavy. Because it meant something investigators had long suspected might be true. Keller knew about the case. Not just casually. He had followed it closely enough to collect newspaper articles. Maybe even obsess over them. Which fit perfectly with another piece of the behavioral profile the FBI had created years earlier. Some offenders remain drawn to the crimes they commit. They follow the news coverage. They keep souvenirs. They revisit the story again and again in their minds. If Keller had been responsible for Emily's disappearance, those newspaper clippings might have been his way of reliving the moment. His way of keeping the memory alive. But once again, the trail had gone cold. The motel Keller stayed at in Grand Junction had long since changed ownership. Old records were incomplete. The staff who worked there during Keller's stay had moved on. No one knew where he went after leaving town. Still, Bennett refused to let the lead fade. She expanded the search across the western states, contacting repair shops, agricultural suppliers, and equipment yards where someone with Keller's skills might have found work. Months passed. Then nearly a year. Then, finally, a break. It came from a sheriff's department in Montana. A patrol officer had responded to a minor vehicle accident outside a rural highway stop. 2 trucks had collided at low speed. No injuries. Just a routine report. But when the officer ran the driver's identification through the system, a name popped up that triggered a notification from an old investigative alert. Thomas Keller. The man investigators in Ohio had been searching for. The moment Bennett received the call, the weight of nearly a decade of unanswered questions seemed to rush back into the room. Keller had been located. Alive. living under his own name in a small town outside Billings, working at an equipment yard repairing farm machinery. The life he had been living for years, quiet, isolated, drifting between jobs, had finally intersected with a moment of bad luck. A simple traffic accident. And suddenly, the man who might hold the answer to one of Ohio's most haunting cold cases was back on the radar. But finding him was only the beginning. Because investigators still faced the hardest part. Proving what happened on County Road 18. Without a body. Without witnesses. Without a confession. All they had were fragments. A partial DNA profile. A truck seen in the distance. A scar on the back of a man's hand. And the memory of a young woman who stepped out of her car on a dark October night and vanished. As detectives prepared to travel to Montana, one thought lingered heavily in Bennett's mind. For nearly 10 years, Thomas Keller had lived his life freely. He had driven across state lines, taken jobs, met people, watched the world continue moving forward while Emily Carter's story remained frozen in time. Now the past was about to catch up with him. And somewhere deep inside the silence of that October night in 2007, the truth about what happened beside Emily's open car door was still waiting. Waiting for the moment when the man who stood there in the darkness would finally have to answer for it. The flight to Montana felt longer than the distance on the map. Nearly 10 years had passed since Emily Carter vanished on County Road 18, and now Detective Laura Bennett was finally traveling toward the man who might hold the answer to the mystery that had haunted an entire town. Outside the airplane window, the land stretched out in endless ridges and plains, a world of quiet highways and isolated farms, not so different from the Ohio farmland where the story began. The irony wasn't lost on Bennett. Thomas Keller had run from one rural landscape to another, blending into the kind of places where people rarely asked questions about strangers who kept to themselves. But running had only delayed the moment that was now coming. By the time Bennett and 2 investigators from Ohio arrived in Billings, the local sheriff's office had already begun discreetly watching Keller. They didn't want him to vanish again. The equipment yard where he worked sat on the outskirts of town, a wide gravel lot scattered with tractors, irrigation rigs, and rusting machinery waiting for repair. Keller had been employed there for almost 2 years. Just like every other job in his drifting history. Quiet. Reliable. Kept to himself. The yard manager told deputies that Keller rarely socialized with co-workers. He worked long hours, fixed engines with careful precision, and then went home to a small rental house on the edge of town. No family visits. No parties. No close friends. Just the steady rhythm of a man who seemed comfortable living alone. When Bennett first saw Keller from across the equipment yard, the moment felt strangely ordinary. He was standing beside a tractor with the hood open, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. A tall man. Broad shoulders. Exactly the silhouette investigators had studied for years in that grainy reflection captured on Emily's phone. For a long moment, Bennett simply watched him, trying to imagine the same man standing beside Emily's car door on a dark Ohio road. Trying to imagine the moment their lives intersected. Then the deputies approached him. Keller looked surprised but not frightened when they introduced themselves. Thomas Keller, one of the officers asked. He nodded slowly. We'd like to speak with you. The interview took place inside a small office at the sheriff's department. Keller sat calmly across the table, hands folded, eyes steady. He looked older than the photograph from his Ohio driver's license. Lines around the eyes. Gray beginning to creep into his hair. But the scar across the back of his right hand was still there. Clear, unmistakable. Bennett began carefully. Questions about his work history. His moves from state to state. The equipment repair jobs he had taken over the years. Keller answered without hesitation. His voice was low and controlled. Nothing in his demeanor suggested panic or fear. Then Bennett mentioned Ohio. The change was subtle. A pause. Just a fraction of a second. But she noticed it. You lived near Willow Creek in 2007, she said. Keller nodded. Yeah. For a while. Do you remember a woman named Emily Carter? The silence that followed stretched for several seconds. Keller leaned back slightly in his chair. I remember hearing about someone going missing around that time, he said finally. But I didn't know her. The response was almost identical to the one he had given investigators nearly a decade earlier. Calm. Controlled. Predictable. Bennett placed a photograph on the table. Emily's car. The open door. The same crime scene image that had haunted the investigation for years. This was found on County Road 18 the night she disappeared, Bennett said quietly. Keller glanced at the photograph for only a moment. Then looked away. I heard about that in the news, he replied. Terrible thing. His composure remained steady. But Bennett could feel the tension building beneath the surface of the conversation. So she moved to the next piece. The pickup truck. You owned a dark blue extended cab truck back then, she said. Correct. Keller shrugged. Yeah. Lots of people did. We have video footage showing a truck matching that description following Emily's car that night. Another pause. Keller's eyes remained fixed on the table. That doesn't mean it was mine. The statement hung in the air. Technically true. But something about the way he said it felt rehearsed. Prepared. Bennett slid another document across the table. A photograph taken from Keller's old driver's license. His right hand visible in the frame. The scar across the knuckles. Several witnesses remember a man with a scar like this, she said. Driving a truck like yours. Keller didn't respond immediately. For the first time since the interview began, his jaw tightened slightly. But when he spoke, his voice remained calm. A lot of people have scars. The room fell silent again. Because everyone present understood something important. They were standing at the edge of the truth. But the final step still required proof. And that proof was sitting quietly inside a sealed evidence envelope back in Ohio. The partial DNA profile recovered from the blood on Emily's car door. Bennett leaned forward. Thomas, she said softly, would like to collect a DNA sample. For the first time, Keller's eyes lifted fully to meet hers. The calm expression remained. But something colder flickered behind it. You got a warrant, he asked. Not anger. Not panic. Just a simple question. Because Keller understood exactly where the line stood between suspicion and evidence. And he knew investigators couldn't cross it without legal authority. Bennett held his gaze. Not yet. The answer was honest. And in that moment, the interview reached its quiet breaking point. Keller leaned back in his chair again. Then he gave a small, almost tired smile. I think we're done here, he said. Outside the sheriff's office, the Montana sky stretched wide and empty over the plains. Somewhere far to the east, nearly 2,000 miles away, County Road 18 still cut through the Ohio farmland exactly as it had on the night Emily Carter disappeared. The same dark road. The same quiet wind. The same unanswered question hanging over everything. Because the man, who might know what happened during those 15 minutes, had just looked investigators in the eye and walked away without giving them the truth.